don't know Matthew, raise your hand. Oh, you know? Okay, so you have to introduce yourself then. Just kidding. So you tell us a little bit more. So Matthew is the founder and creator of WordPress. Everyone knows about, most of them knows about WordPress. Basically, I have a few questions prepared for you. Maybe you can introduce yourself and then you can talk about it. First of all, as a founder of a startups, so why you start your business, but you drop out from university, right? So that's the hard decision for Hong Kong people, especially. You know why? Your parents will basically against that. And then why open source? So basically people are thinking about open source seems like not a profitable way of business model, or more hard to gain money or something like that. So maybe I can pass the mic to Matthew and then you can say something and introduce yourself.
Sure.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. I apologize very much for being a bit tardy. I had trouble navigating here, but I'm very glad to be with you all here this afternoon. And this is my first time back in Hong Kong in 6 or 7 years. It's been a while since I was last here. Hopefully not that long before I come back though. As you introduced, WordPress, I co-founded a project called WordPress about 12 years ago as an open source project when I was 19. So I did drop out of college after I started it though, after I got successful. And then about 10 years ago, I started a company called Automatic, which, like Elastic, is a commercial company that creates services for WordPress. It's been a very fun journey so far. In WordPress, it's grown from being software that was really just created for me and my friends to being something that now powers about 24% of all websites, although it could be much, much stronger in China. It's WordPress.com has been blocked in mainland for a very long time, so we're very pro free speech and all sorts of stuff. So we've just been blocked for years. But when we were blocked, it was actually about a third of our traffic was coming from China. It was a long time ago. And then with Automatic, basically what we were trying to do is build a company with open source principles. So basically say, look at how open source projects work and what makes them really successful. And then say, how can we apply that to building a business? And so we do things like, instead of having a headquarters in San Francisco or something like that, with everyone there, we have a small office where we get mail and things like that. But of the 390 people, only about 15 are in San Francisco. All the rest are spread all over the world. We now have people in 44 countries. And basically everyone works from home, or coffee shops, or the beach, the parks, wherever they want to work, they can. What matters is whether they get the work done and how they did the work, not where they were when they did it, or what hours they worked. So this has enabled us to build a really remarkable organization because we can hire people regardless of geography. They could be in Hong Kong, they could be in Vietnam, they could be in Antarctica. Really, probably not Antarctica because the internet's not very good there. But any place with good internet, you can be what we call an automatician, or someone who works for Automatic. And we hire for every position in all countries. So that is kind of where we are so far. You asked why I dropped out of university. Why? This was actually a tough question, or a tough decision, because my father was the first sort of in his family to ever go to college, and he worked very, very hard for it. So he was in Houston, Texas, and during the day he worked at Ford Motor Companies, moving boxes around, and then at night he would go to school at the University of Houston. And he was very into computers, but they didn't offer computer science at that time, so he studied math. And also at this time, he's married to my mom and already has had my sister. I cannot imagine this, both going to school, being a parent, and being married. I haven't done any of those things very well. But he did all three, and graduated and was able to create a much better life for my family. You know, he got a job as a programmer for an oil company in Houston, and it created a good middle class life for us. So when I was later going to school, I had it much easier. I wasn't married or didn't have any kids, and I had a scholarship, to go where he had to really work to pay. And so, but the thing that became obvious was that what they were teaching in the school wasn't what was most relevant to where I thought the web was going. So I only took one computer course in my university time, and it was like, they were teaching like .NET, Visual Studio. It was not relevant at all. This wasn't that long ago. I mean, like PHP existed, the web existed, Python existed. Like there was much better ways of doing things than these sort of visual tools that built really bad code. So that's where my passion was, and that's where I really started working on things. But the reason I was able to drop out was that I visited San Francisco and I actually got a job offer. So there's a company there called CNET, which is a media company. They made basically websites about computers, news websites, including news.com. And they were starting to use WordPress. So they offered me to move to San Francisco and get a job. And it was remarkably, actually, for a higher salary than my dad was making at the time, after 20 some odd years for this oil company. So I thought, well, I could stay in school a few more years and hope to get a job like this. You know, San Francisco is like a promised land. It's just an amazing place, beautiful, it's free air conditioning. It's very nice. Or I could maybe do this now and work full time on something that I'm really passionate about and stop, you know, neglecting my classes and doing the bare minimum to pass and really spending all my time working on WordPress. So that was why I dropped out. It was, my parents were supportive but skeptical, but they were still supportive, so.
Oh, that's good, because your parents, I can use this. So, can you hear me? Okay, so basically in Hong Kong, nowadays it's better. Do you know why? Because the flat is too expensive. So the young people can't buy one, so they can go to start their own business. So the opportunity cost is lower now. So these few years, Hong Kong, that's my opinion. So more young people go to start their own business.
I always feel bad saying this because we're in a university, but you don't need to be here. So, when we hire, like I review probably 500 resumes per week, different people applying for jobs at Automatic, and I weight the education almost zero. What we really look at is experience, what you've done, do you volunteer or contribute to open source, like those sorts of things are far more important than anything else to do with your school or grades.
Are you recruiting in Hong Kong?
Absolutely. Like I said, we're hiring in every single city in the world. So
what kind of people you want? Because I think definitely a lot of people are interested to work for WordPress.
Check out automatic.com. So it's AUTOMATTIC.com, and we're hiring JavaScript developers, like hardcore Node and things like that. PHP, obviously. We do what we call happiness engineering, which is support. So people who do live chat and email tickets to help customers, and designers. So people who think about usability and design and crafting experiences.
Okay, so they don't have an office and then they can go to the cafe and everywhere to work, right?
Actually, we give a $250 per month, US dollar per month stipend that you can use either to join a co-working space, if there's one in the area, or you can use it to buy coffee so they don't kick you out of the coffee shop.
Oh, good, that's good.
So you can do either. Because basically our philosophy, we're not pro-office or anti-office. We care about results. We care about output, not input. So we want people to work wherever they feel they're going to be most effective. And that's different for every person. Some people, like I love working at home. Even when I'm in San Francisco, I don't go into the office. I haven't been to our headquarters in probably 4 or 5 months. But for someone else, including some people in the Bay Area, maybe working from home is very distracting because they have lots of dogs or spouses or kids or who knows what running around. Lots of spouses, yeah. I can imagine it's very distracting, you know? So for them, going to an office might allow them to focus better and get more work done, which is really, again, all that matters.
Okay, that's good. So everyone's maybe can check out the website. So the question that I asked, one more before we open to the floor, is I mean everyone start their business, they start with enterprise software, closed one. But why you kickstart with open source? So is it, at least as we know that those days, open source is not quite popular, or yeah, so why you take this big step?
Well, there's two reasons. One is philosophical, and one is practical. And I'll talk about the practical one first. If you look at the history of open source and every industry that it enters, it eventually comes to dominate it. Look at what's happened with databases, with operating systems, with search systems. Like, it doesn't always happen quickly. Sometimes it takes maybe 5, 10 years. But it's tough for any one company, proprietary company, to compete both with all the other proprietary companies and a community working together, right? Because when you get a community working on something, like, it's not just automatic working on WordPress. It's also the New York Times, it's also CNN, it's also GoDaddy, it's also, dozens and dozens of companies that are working together. And again, that's hard for any one company to match, no matter how much money they have. Look at Encyclopedia Britannica versus Wikipedia. Look at Microsoft versus open source based operating systems, which include Mac OS X, Android, and iOS, all based on open source. Look at Oracle versus MySQL, and other open source relational and non-relational databases. So that's the practical reason. So even if just you have you can add 2 and 2 together, you should see that open source is the future. And if you're at this meetup, I imagine you probably agree with that, so I might be preaching to the choir. Oh, thank you. Okay, one person agrees. The second is philosophical. Philosophical, yeah, that's the word. Yeah. Right? Sorry, my English isn't the best. For me, open source is the most powerful idea I've been exposed to in my entire life. Because when you think about it, technology is fundamentally the force for change in our lives. All of us, from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, from the day we're born to the day we die, technology is integrated into every single part of our life. And so that technology being within our control and within our power is really nothing more important in the world. And open source, particularly the GPL, which WordPress is under, provides these fundamental freedoms, right? The 4 freedoms. Freedom to use the software for any purpose, the freedom to see how the software works, freedom to modify the software, and the freedom to distribute those modifications. Those 4 freedoms, which are so simple and appear to be so trivial almost, actually give us the power to hold our digital destinies in our hands. And I think that's really what freedom is. Because if we're at the mercy of someone else's algorithms or proprietary software, we're not truly free, right? Because our lives are being governed by something we don't even know how it works. And when you think about these ideas of open source, they can apply to everything. In the US, we have elections. The software that runs these elections is not open source. Anyone who's been following the news the past, let's call it decade, sees that most software has lots of security problems. But at least with open source, there's lots of people looking at it and finding the problems and working together to fix them. Where with proprietary software, it's a complete black box. I don't think, certainly in America, you shouldn't build a democracy on a black box. So all the way from how we're governed, to how we live, to how our cars work, to every single part of our lives, we need transparency there, and we need to be able to hack it. And I mean hack in the most beautiful sense of the word, which is you should be able to modify how your car works. Imagine, this is kind of how cars are going, but imagine 30 years ago when cars were simpler. If you opened up the hood, and not only was there just a black box that said do not touch, if you tried to open it, you could go to jail. Right? That's kind of how copyright law and user agreements and everything works around software, which I just think is morally odious, meaning that it's harmful to the world. The other practical and philosophical combination is that WordPress was built on existing open source software, just like Elasticsearch was built on existing open source software. So because I didn't have to start from scratch, I was able to build not just on other technologies like PHP, MySQL, Apache, but an existing platform, which was called B2, to create WordPress. Got ahead of everyone else, because you're not starting from scratch. You're able to stand on the shoulders of giants. If I was going to build a proprietary search system, I would need to start writing all that code from day one. Just like if I was building a car, I would need to invent a tire, axles, motors, air conditioner, everything. If I can start with Elasticsearch and use that as my base, I can improve it and get things done much faster. And in fact, if I'm really smart, I'm going to share my improvements back with them, because I know that then that'll become part of the product and everyone will benefit. So that's why open source, just once it gets going, once the positive flywheel starts, it's very difficult to derail.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, that was a long answer, but I feel really passionate about this.
I feel it. So let's open to the floor, and may I take the question first from Dick? You have a question? The open source content?
Sure, just say your name and the
Yeah,
question as well.
I'm Dick, and I have a question about how to run a startup. Not exactly one the startup. And you have mentioned about the hiring, which when you just found your company, you at least I am a developer in a startup, and the startup is working hard to recruit people, and that's that I think that is a common issue, common problem for the Hong Kong startup. And could you share your experience in how to recruit developer or your staff when your company is small, maybe just a few people, or just when you just found your company?
And so how to get people to be crazy enough to join your startup, which will probably fail. I mean, not yours in particular, but just most startups fail, right? So a rational person should not join a startup, because you'll probably be out of a job. It's just true. I mean, this is just true. Oops, no worries. The best coders in the world, the best designers in the world, they don't really worry about having a job, because they know that their skills are very in demand and they can get a job almost anywhere. Right? That was for me the safety net when starting the company, as I knew at the very least I was a coder who could make, X amount per year, and I could go back to CNET or Google or something like that and just be an engineer. So I wasn't going to end up on the street. I had this skill which was variable, which is why all of y'all should learn to either code or design. So when these people have choices, these people tend to be motivated by things that aren't just money or equity or things like that. So you have to make your workplace someplace that they want to be. So things that are important there. I believe impact is very important. So just like people need to work for more than a paycheck, they might want to feel like their work is having an impact on the world somehow. It could be very small. Maybe that's just, say, connecting Wi-Fi in a village that doesn't have internet right now. Or it could be, could it be as small as a single family or a single person, or as large as WordPress's ambition to democratize publishing for the whole world. So we have, 7-ish billion people that we're trying to reach. At any level between there, your work can feel meaningful. Right? If you feel like it's it's for more than just the payoff. And I think that's important in everyone's job, that they feel like they're working for more than just the paycheck. And the second is to make it fun, right? So just make it fun for yourself, and then that will probably also make it fun for other people who are like you, who are probably the first people that you want to hire. So the fact that we were distributed, the fact that we would open source all of our code, the fact how we did source control and deployed the software, and everything that we were doing was kind of things that frustrated me at other companies or other environments, or that I thought would be just more fun to do. And so that actually helps a lot. If you think about, if you go to our website, automatic.com, which I suggested you do, it's basically just a funnel to our jobs page. The entire website is saying, hey, this is a lot of fun, come join the fun. So think about that as well for your company website, how you're marketing yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. So we can take some questions from the floor, but you have to speak loud because we don't have wireless mic.
My name is Chris.
Hi, Chris.
I'm pretty interested to know, how do you manage to hire people from around the world, practically? Any issues about tax or anything when you have to deal with people working from so many countries?
Sure. So in the first 100, 150 people, we didn't really worry about that outside of our home country, which is the US. So in the US, there's definitely rules when people are employees, there's stuff you have to do, but it's not too bad. So we hired, you can hire paycheck firms. I think the one we use is called Trident, that you just pay them and then they pay everyone else, which usually works. It's much better than when I was sending it out manually and sometimes I forget. For international, what we did in the beginning, and what we still do now for countries where we don't have very many people, is we just say, they're contractors with a fixed monthly fee. So that means that they are responsible for handling, they're like freelancers in some ways. So they're responsible for handling their taxes or whatever that is. But two things are different. We don't treat them any differently from anyone else. So either you're on a petition or you're not. So whether you happen to be an employee or a subsidiary or whatever it is, if you're one of us, you're one of us. So we don't create any distinctions there. And we try to make our benefits apply to everyone. And two, once we get above a certain number of people in a country, for us that's about 5, so somewhere between 5 and 10, we'll create a subsidiary in that country. So we now have subsidiaries in South Africa, UK, Australia, Ireland, Canada, the countries where we have concentrations of people. And so those people can actually become formal employees of those countries. Now this is complicated, but by the time you get big enough that matters, you can hire people to worry about it. So we have a really good HR team. Well, it's just 2 people, but they work on all this stuff. And so I haven't thought about it, to be honest, for years. So I would say don't worry about it too much, because people freelance all over the world all the time. So whether they're contracting for you or someone else, it's just a matter of the shared expectations. Thank you.
Okay, next question.
Okay.
Isaiah, I have a few questions. The first one is, what is the single most important factor that leads to workplace success today? The second is...
Maybe let's do them one at a time.
Okay.
So the question was the single most important factor that has led to WordPress's success today. That is a hard question, because I think it is a combination of literally thousands of things. If there was one thing that if we didn't have it, I don't think we'd be where we are, it's the community. So it's the fact that WordPress is not just me or the lead developers, but it's actually thousands, tens of thousands of people who work together for their own interests, for community interests, for anything, to build plugins, to build themes, to write documentation, to help each other. There's so many people volunteering together. That's what creates that unstoppable force. And that's when open source is really at its best. When you have not just the interest of one company, but the interest of as many people as possible, a plurality contributing towards a shared goal and philosophy. So I guess the flip side of that community is that from the very early on, we've articulated our philosophy. So by being true to the things that we feel are most important, like the GPL license, like web standards, like certain things that we write and we say like this is almost like our constitution, that lets people know who should be involved and also who should not be involved. So for people who believe in that, they get involved, and for people who might disagree with that, they're not coming in and trying to change it, because they know that this is the shared assumption of how we're going to work. All right, next question. You got a couple.
Yeah. The second one
2
is,
only.
How did you decide? At what point did you actually start to monetize, and at what point did you become profitable? How did you come up with the right pricing model?
Sure. So at what point do we start to monetize and become profitable? It's a good question. I don't remember exactly. It was post the creation of Automatic, which would have been in 2005. So a couple of years after the project started. I think it was good that we didn't try to do any business around it too early, because honestly, it was kind of too small to really do much with it. But once 2005, we had some pretty significant momentum. Our first revenue streams were Akismet, which is our anti-spam system, and partnerships with Webhost. And so as soon as we launched those, we were actually profitable. We weren't making a ton of money, we were kind of right around break even, but we were sustainable as a company, and that was very, very valuable.
Okay, so next question from Kim.
Kinko, I wonder what's your view on the trend that people are more interested in bite-sized content? Bite-sized content.
So, what's your thought on the trend that people are more interested in bite-sized content?
Yeah, maybe I elaborate a bit. I'm a WordPress user for like 10 plus years. I've been blogging, to be honest, on and off for more than 10 years, but I've been seeing more and more people that only interested in like a few words, rather than reading articles of more than maybe 500 words.
I've seen both. So one thing we definitely probably experience in our own lives is that we have lots of moments when we're in an elevator or waiting in line or something like that, where we look at our phones. And probably what we're wanting to get into there is something short. Because the elevator's door is going to open in 30 seconds, so we don't want to start like a 10,000 word article, at the beginning of the elevator, right? Because it's kind of awkward. And platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Weibo, and honestly messaging are really about this short form communication. And there's nothing wrong with that. What I've seen also happen simultaneously is long form content has become more popular than ever. So what's happening now is that great content, which has a big investment into the quality, into the depth of what it's doing, not long just for the sake of long, but long because it has to be, because it's covering something that's really meaty. People still want that. The same ways that you can't live on potato chips, You can't live on carbohydrates. You need to have some protein and some meat in there every now and then, or some veggies or tofu or whatever. I'm from Texas, so it's always meat. I believe that intellectually, just like in our diet, we need different types of food. Intellectually, we need different types of inputs to engage us at different points. And what I personally find the most fulfillment from is when I do engage with these longer form things, whether it's long articles, a magazine like New Yorker or Economist, or long blog posts, or best of all books. I still think that in terms of bang for your buck, in terms of return for hours spent, you will not get anything more on this planet than reading a book. A good book, I guess. If you're reading a bad book, maybe you're wasting time. But a good book is probably the most valuable use of the time you can spend. So that's what we've seen. And in fact, we acquired a company that focuses purely on this. Sorry about that. Long reads. So if you go to longreads.com, if you are hungry for something more substantive, check out longreads.com. And literally every day, they're highlighting content from WordPress, but also from around the web. That is that long, great writing that really engages your imagination, your mind, and sometimes tugs on your heartstrings as well.
So you don't find yourself bored by people who are also only interested in bite-sized content?
Do I find myself
Bothered by the trend?
ordered?
Like you don't find it frustrating?
Oh, bothered? No. I do think that society, like personally, you need to put more substantial things in your brain. If it's just like if all you consumed in the world was Kim Kardashian TV, your life might be as full as it could be, So I encourage everyone in their own lives, and this is something I struggle with as well. Like I have literally 2 cell phones, not just one. I can go between them. You can definitely get caught up and spend all day reading very, very short things. But you might not find that you grew.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Mr.
Right in the front here.
Hi,
Okay, second.
I'm Fionn from Nodi. We were at your talk yesterday, and you mentioned that.
Maybe stand up so everyone can
Oh.
hear. Because I can
Yeah.
hear easily, but they might not be able to.
Hi, I'm Fionn from Nodi. So we were at your talk yesterday, where you mentioned that with the monthly visit on Facebook and WordPress, you managed to run a really lean team of 300 something people versus Facebook with 9,000.
Mhm.
How do you manage that, especially when you work from home all the time?
Yeah. So we have a lean team, and how do we manage everyone working from home? This is actually a very common question. Like people ask, like, how do you know people aren't just like playing video games all day, or in their underwear, or drunk, or So those last 2 I actually don't know. They might be drunk in their underwear, but what I do know is whether they're outputting whatever their job is. And if they're playing video games all day and not doing their work, it'll be obvious, right? Because they were hired to do something. Create code, solve user problems, answer tickets. And especially in contrast to their colleagues, because we have a very high standard of performance at Automatic. So, and the teams are small, typically 5 to 10 people. So when one person isn't pulling their weight on the team, it's very obvious to everyone else on that team. And think about it yourself, like in your own professional experience. Have you ever been bugged that someone else you were working with wasn't working as hard as you, but was getting paid the same amount? Right, it drives you crazy. And I think when you have a good company environment where people are comfortable raising that, both with their colleagues and up the chain to their managers, that sort of performance can be dealt with relatively quickly. Now, it doesn't mean that the person should be fired. Maybe they just didn't realize. obviously playing video games all day is an extreme example. But perhaps what they're doing is spending too much time planning out or reading updates or communicating with colleagues and not enough coding, for example. This is a problem that happens frequently at Automatic. So that might just be something that they need some feedback on. And I find often the people who are performing below par don't realize it. They don't know that they're not doing a good enough job. And counterintuitively, some of the highest performers at the company are very insecure about their performance. They think they're not doing enough. This is the great, I don't know what to call this, like the oxymoron, the paradox of like performance, is that the people who don't need any feedback at all often are worried they're doing badly, and the folks who really need help are like, I had no idea. What do you mean? So I guess that means if you're not worried about your job, maybe you should work harder. And if you are worried, maybe you're doing a good job. But what we just try to find is again, being fair. All this comes back to fairness. And practically how we manage it, we use a few tools. Slack, which is a chat tool. It allows you to chat with your colleagues. Think about like IRC on steroids. And P2. P2 is actually a program that we wrote on top of WordPress that allows you to communicate. And it basically transforms a blog from something that looks like a blog into like a collaboration tool. So everything's real time, the threads, all the comments show inline, so the comments are at equal weight to the post. And P2s are really powerful. So we actually have almost no email inside Automatic. From other automaticians, I maybe get, if you take out HR stuff, like things that are private, I maybe only get 3 to 5 emails a month from 390 colleagues. So everything else happens on the P2s, which means it's public inside the company. Everyone can see everything else. And it's all archived and searchable. And so it's a pretty cool system. So check it out. It's at P2, that's P2theme.com.
Okay. So next question.
My name is Nelson. Does it bother you if one day you find out somebody make your open source product as a closed source product and sell it for good reward that you can have enjoy the same reward?
So would it bother me if someone was selling it?
Yeah.
So there's two things you said actually, selling it or making it proprietary or closed source. So if someone wanted to sell WordPress, would not bother me at all. Because remember I talked about those 4 freedoms. And one of those freedoms, what was your name again?
Nelson.
Nelson. So one of those freedoms is you can download WordPress, search for a place, and call it Nelson Press. And you can sell it for $1 million if you want. That is totally allowed within the license. That's a freedom you have, and the freedom everyone who's worked on WordPress gives to everyone who uses it, which I think is kind of a beautiful and crazy and awesome thing. Now, but if you were to download WordPress, maybe even keep it WordPress or call it Nelson Press or anything, but change the license, that would bother me quite a bit. Because then you would be, for anyone who uses Nelson Press, they would not be receiving the same freedoms that the WordPress developer tried to pass on to their users. It would be a violation of the license, the GPL license. So that doesn't happen very frequently. It's infrequent even with big companies. Like there's been, in the US, there's been almost no court cases about GPL. Because whenever it's come to a case, even a giant company like Cisco or Microsoft, they always settle or back off or make their code open source. So it's very rare that people try to violate the GPL, but when it does happen, and when it happens in our community, we take it very, very seriously. But Nelson Press, also GPL, sell it, give it away, make a service to compete with mine. It's totally cool.
But that would be millions to be yours, right?
But it's a market, right? So it doesn't matter if you can download my software and create something better than me, then you deserve the customers. And the reality is that someone doesn't need to build on WordPress to compete with us. Our competitors are Wix and Squarespace and Tumblr and all these other platforms that don't use any WordPress code at all. So in the broader sense of things, people are going to compete with you with or without the code. And then if they are going to take your code and do a better job than you, that should be a wake-up call. It should tell you that maybe you're fundamentally misaddressing the market in some way. And this actually happened to us. I can tell you all the story really quickly. So early on in the days of WordPress.com, again, you can download WordPress and run WordPress.com. Like everything we can do, any of y'all could do. Just a little configuration. So that happened. So we had WordPress.com, And someone took all the software and made it, it was called iblogs.com. And they started to get more signups than we did. And I was like, oh, nuts, you know? What is going on here? And I went through like several emotions, you know, one of them being like jealousy or anger, or like, you know, and this isn't fair. But in reality, it is fair, and life's not fair, and like, you know, all's fair in love and war and business. And I thought about it, and I started to dig into what they were doing. And it turned out that they were just selling the benefits of what they were providing a lot better. Even though it was the exact same software, just with a different name. On their homepage, they were talking about, you know, connect with a worldwide audience, be discoverable in search engines. It's easy to update and use. Your whole team can update and use it. You know, you don't need to pay anyone or you have only one account. You know, they were really selling the benefits of WordPress as a content management system. And on our homepage, we said something like, start a free blog, and then it was like, why the heck not? Right? Apparently that's not as compelling. I think why the heck not is a great reason. But it sort of woke me up that our marketing wasn't as good. And so what did we do? We started to iterate on our messaging to users when they were coming to our site to sign up. And within a very short period of time, our signups started surpassing theirs. And eventually they disappeared. So.
And next question?
Yeah, hi, I'm Rafael. How did you go about funding Automatic? Did you bootstrap it? And do you have any advice for us about funding our startups?
So how do we fund Automatic, and any advice on funding? The best funding in the world is revenue. Right? If you can have customers opening their pocketbooks and paying you, there's literally nothing better, because it gives you all options. It gives you the option to just go with that and grow it. It gives you the option to go to an investor and say, hey, I don't need you, but I might let you in if you're really nice. Which, by the way, saying no is catnip to investors. They go crazy, because they literally have thousands of people a year come in and say, please, please give me money. So the first time someone's like, I don't need your money, they just go wild. It's kind of funny. Y'all have catnip here, right? Is that a catnip? Does anyone know what catnip? Okay. A lot of cats? Okay. What we did was, like I said, we got this early revenue, to your question, and so we bootstrapped in the beginning. We did raise about 5 or 6 months after that. So again, this is like 3 years after WordPress has started and 5 or 6 months after the company has started and is already making revenue. We raised about $1 million. That was in 2005 or 6, I don't remember exactly. Then again in 2008, we raised like another $11 million. So again, the growth was really fast. People really wanted to put money into the company. And then we didn't raise again until last year. So from 2008 to 2014, we just grew the company from the revenue and grew it very organically. In 2014, I became CEO of the company. So I've been CEO in the very beginning and then hired a CEO to replace me. And then 8 years after that, we decided to switch jobs again. So I became CEO and he started doing other stuff in the company. And when I became into that role, it became obvious to me that we were missing, there were opportunity costs to the decisions we were making due to lack of capital. There were things that were very obvious that we should be doing that we weren't because we were running mostly break even, spending roughly what came in the door. We still only had about $10 million in the bank, which on one hand is a lot of money, on the other hand is actually a very small amount of money for the amount of revenue we were making and for the scale of the opportunities we were considering, things that might cost $20, $50, $100 million to do. So we raised our third round in 2014, which was $160 million, which is a lot. That was bigger than our competitor's IPO. So essentially had like a, but we, this money gives us, war chest is the term people use, but I don't like that because I don't like military metaphors, but it essentially gives us optionality. So now with this 9 figures of money in the bank, we can choose to make acquisitions, like the acquisition we made of WooCommerce a few months ago. We can choose to invest in the areas that might not pay off for 5 to 10 years down the line. And we can grow the team. Not worrying about capital, because of course the money coming in or out the door is very important to the sustainability of the business. But but really use it as a lever, and in fact, put a little more speed on it. A joke I made, or analogy I made yesterday, so I apologize to people who were here when I spoke yesterday, was one of my favorite quotes is from Tim O'Reilly. I'll give you two favorite quotes actually, one I didn't say yesterday. One is from Walt Disney, Mickey Mouse. He says, "We don't make movies to make money, we make money to make more movies." And that's always really resonated with me. That we don't make WordPress.com or Kismet to make, we don't do all that stuff to make money, we do it to make more products that we can give to people. Two is Tim O'Reilly, who said something, I'm probably going to butcher it, where funding a company is like a road trip, right? You need gas to get from point A to B, but the point of a road trip is not to visit gas stations, right? It's to see the sights and visit the Grand Canyon or whatever it is, the Great Wall. So that's something I think about. But my addendum to that was that gas in your tank helps you go faster, but sometimes people just pour gasoline all over their car. It's not really, they spend too much money once they have a lot in the bank. So even though we have a lot of money in the bank now, as a company, we've actually become more frugal, much to many people's chagrin. We are the cheapest company you will ever meet. And so, yeah, that's just kind of the direction that we've gone. And I think that's just trying to keep the gas in the tank and not, on top of the hood. Thank you for your question.
Thank you for the question. So, the one with Kat.
I just want to ask, so money is not the problem that you have in the early days, or it is? Is there any other problem that you have in early days, and how do you mitigate that?
So is money a problem in the early days, or was it? Or what were the problems? Well, as the philosopher Biggie said, more money, more problems. So just because we were making more revenue, it often created more opportunities to waste it or attracted more competitors to the market or anything. So, one of the things about being an entrepreneur and building a company is that you're kind of lurching from fire to fire and explosion to explosion. And at times it seems like everything's going to crash and burn, but you I don't know, you just kind of make it through it. And you prioritize and you work on what seems most important. So our biggest problems through the years have really been every single aspect of doing a product or company. So we've had problems with hiring, we've had problems with people, we've had problems with investors, we've had problems with funding, we've had problems with design, we have problems with security, we've had problems with attacks. Really almost everything you can imagine can going wrong, probably will at some point when you're building something. But it's not how many times you fall, it's how many times you get up. And that's the key, is even when you feel overwhelmed, go to your team and go to the people around you and talk about the problems and figure out a plan to address it. And also, if you can, keep your emotions out of it. You can't control the world, you can only control your reaction to it. And this is the philosophy espoused by the Stoic philosophers, and I encourage any of you all to check out like a Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, some of these ancient philosophers, Greek philosophers, who really explored this depth. It's just as applicable today as it was thousands of years ago. That, again, the only thing you can control is your reactions. So when it seems like the world is falling down, everything is going wrong, try to remove yourself from the emotions of the situation. Or even when things are going well, remove yourself from the emotions of the situation and observe it. And try to be a dispassionate observer of everything going on. And then, I don't know who said it, but if you're going through heck, keep going, right? Like, don't stop and loiter. Like, keep walking through it. And ultimately, anyone who quits is not going to be able to talk about it later. We have time for a few more. I'll try to stretch it a little bit. So, I'll try to get through the last ones rapid fire. I have to catch a plane, so I apologize.
I want to say that.
But I would miss it for you guys.
Okay. So,
let me get to the other folks and then we'll look back if we have time. So, good.
What's the biggest threat you think you have in WordPress now?
Biggest threat to WordPress is really just ourselves. I don't worry about competitors or anything like that because we have so many users, so much momentum already. It's that if we fail to adapt and be agile and continue on the path that, because it's not that we've had a single strategy over the past 12 years, it's that we've been listening to our users and iterating frequently and then adapting to how the world changes. So as long as we can continue to do that, I think we'll be successful. The moment we stop doing that, I think it's when, it starts to die a little bit. Let's bounce to the
Next question.
front. Sure, right here.
I'm Kevin. I was going to touch on the threats or the competitor side. So when you look at, I guess, like Wix or Squarespace, I guess they don't have that open source nature. So I guess you might feel that you have the open source nature and you should be able to overpower them at some point, potentially. But guys like, say, like Medium, they're closed, but they have that discovery aspect as well. Do you feel like WordPress needs a stronger discovery alongside of that, the reader that you guys already have?
Sure. So to summarize the question, open source. It sounds like you're saying open source will probably overpower Wix and Squarespace, but for something like Medium,
guys,
or networks, really,
Sure.
anything with a network effect is tougher. Yeah, it definitely is. And because the network effect creates its own intrinsic value,
Exactly, yeah.
right? Which
It has the distribution already.
it can become a flywheel. For various reasons, I'm not personally worried about Medium, but it wouldn't be a huge stretch for Facebook to making web pages and blogs as easy as they, and then tie it into everything they do.
Yeah.
If anything, I'm kind of shocked like that Google or Facebook or Twitter hasn't done this already, because it seems kind of obvious. So I do think it is crucial for WordPress to build out more of the social and distribution side, because that's ultimately what provides value. Now, part of what's valuable about us, and why I think even if Facebook did do what I just said, we would still compete very well with them, is that we're Swiss, we're independent. Meaning that if you're Facebook or you're Twitter, like you want to divide up the world and say, if you use us, you should not use anyone else, right? But none of us think that way, right? We're okay having multiple accounts. We're okay having an Instagram and a LinkedIn and because we use different networks for different services. Who uses more than one messaging platform? Right? Pretty much everyone. You're on a WhatsApp or WeChat or Line or iMessage, whatever. Like, why do we use multiple of them? They all do the same stuff. Slight differences, but kind of all the same things. You end up using different ones for different things because they have differences to the product that lend itself to usage in different ways. Like I really like how actually Facebook Messenger does images and galleries. My personal favorite for sort of secure stuff is Telegram, right? Because you could do end-to-end encryption in a really cool way. So there's these different networks. We can always be in the middle because what we care about is you, not us. So WordPress will always be able to post to all the other social networks. And so that is that independence is powerful. We are also working on things. If you check out, for example, the WordPress app, there is now a reader inside of it, and there's notifications, and there's a lot more social features, likes, where we're changing how comments work, that we've seen some pretty incredible engagement on thus far. We're not really publicizing it a ton, because media loves to make stories out of these things, but in reality, it's one of the most significant drivers of growth inside WordPress right now, is this reader, which is basically just a simplified RSS reader in a lot of ways, but it kind of gives you the content rather than just trying to show you ads, because we're not an advertising-driven company. We're not trying to profile and target you and then sell you stuff, right? We're just trying to show you what you want to read. Cool. Rapid fire. How about right there? Oh, thank you.
Question about Fernando. I saw an interview with Chris Sacca. I think he did a Periscope on you some time ago, and I caught it. I don't know why I was trying the app, and he popped up, and it was a very interesting conversation you had with him about technology in the valley and everything. And it seems to me that you guys are a lot more advanced in the way you think about the change of work and the change of industries, and even beyond geopolitics and stuff like that. How much of that influence? I know what you mentioned right now about kind of almost like Vipassana style meditation, metrics, right? How much of that is actually influencing the way business is conducted over there in the valley? A lot of the guys that have a good base already and can afford to actually go beyond just making money or making products basically, but actually changing the world, and some of them actually succeeding at it. And how much is that? How much of that is actually going on in the valley right now? And on that basis, what is the most exciting stuff, technology-wise, that you are seeing right now, and the most interesting people, like Chris or other people that you've seen, that we should actually keep an eye on?
That's impossible to summarize. So I hope everyone heard it. But how much is some of the things I talked about influencing companies in the Valley? I would say not universally. It's one of these things where the future is here, but is not evenly distributed. So there's many companies chasing things that I would consider trivial. Not trivial in that they address, I don't think trivial or serious means that you're necessarily trying to address the whole world or save the world, but that they're more self-interested than actually trying to make even a small audience's life really better. They have a paucity of ambition. Again, not for the whole world, but for like the craft of, they're doing it for the wrong reasons. So there's certainly a lot of that. That said, embedded in many of the companies that are most successful, including like Uber or Airbnb, is a broader mission. You know, to change how transportation works, or change how, you know, we live and move around. So there is some really cool stuff. In terms of things I'm most excited about, just off the top of my head, I'm excited about financial tech innovation, so things like Wealthfront or Wave. Anything based on Bitcoin or truly distributed technologies, I think is really, really interesting. I'm excited about more ubiquitous encryption, because I think a free society needs the ability to have private conversations by default. So messaging apps like Telegram is not perfect, but I hope that's maybe something more open source in the future could replace it. And to be honest, I'm still really excited about publishing. I believe that the more people publish, the better the world becomes. And so providing a platform for more of the world to do that is the thing that gets me up every morning, and the last thing I think about usually before I go to sleep.
Okay, can I take the question at the very back?
Yeah. Hey, my name's Jonas. I have a question about, okay, you're solving a publishing problem for individuals and companies. What problems do you think should be solved on the internet but aren't being solved, and you're being frustrated about it?
So what problems aren't being solved but should be solved? I have an easy answer to this one because we just bought a company to do it, and that's e-commerce. There's no good way to have independent e-commerce on the web. You're either part of like a giant network like Amazon or Etsy, or I know you have equivalents here that I'm not as familiar with. But having your own store that really belongs to you, too hard. So WooCommerce is a product that we bought, and now we're hoping to scale out to really solve this. Because it is an aspect of publishing. Like commercial activity and people selling things online is kind of goes back to like the first barter and trade that we did as human beings back in the prehistoric ages. So I'm excited about trying to make that a bit more open and more accessible. Okay, rapid fire.
Interested if you have anything to say about doing business with China.
Anything I have to say about doing business with China?
Generally.
I'm sure that y'all could tell me way more than anything I could tell you, to be totally honest.
I mean, in terms of WordPress.
No, even in terms of WordPress. We, post being blocked in the mainland, we haven't really attempted for any of our services to be in China, and partially, there's a lot of reasons for that, and we don't currently have any employees in mainland or in Hong Kong. So I'm not opposed to it at all, but just there's no one currently. So right now our business is not really interacting with China too much. Someday, absolutely, I hope to. Particularly if the principles that we hold very near and dear to our company, you know, freedom of speech, privacy, things like that, if that becomes more widespread in any society, it's definitely someplace where we want to be. Cool. I'm gonna have to.
Last question?
Last one? Okay. Sure.
This time
Yeah.
to go to the airport.
I'm gonna have to run after this though, I apologize. Normally I stay and try to meet everyone. I will really have to run though. So, okay, last two, we'll get you in there.
I'm Nixon, and I want to ask how many money have you spent on deploying servers for WordPress.com around the world?
How much money have we spent on deploying servers for WordPress.com around the world? That's a good question. We now have, I don't know exactly the number, but somewhere around 15 points of presence all over the globe, and we're doing that again to increase the speed. We push quite a bit of bandwidth, you know, petabytes per day of content all over the world. If I think of our CapEx, it's probably the last couple of years somewhere around like $50 million.
Wow.
So maybe a little less than that. Maybe like, yeah, somewhere between 40 and 50. So that's just a guess though. I'd have to look it up to know the exact, but that's about the magnitude. It's not 500, it's not 5, so it's, it's around the 40 or 50. Last one. I hope it's great.
Thank you, April. I want to know, where are your sources of innovation come from? You said a lot about users. What are your others?
Sources of innovation, that's a very good question, so thank you. Users are definitely a big part of it, right? Because it's the people using your software is fundamentally the source of all truth for your product, right? If it works for them, that's amazing. If it doesn't, that's bad. Where I find a lot of inspiration is in other disciplines entirely. So I don't often get super inspired looking at competitors' websites or flows or things like that. We definitely do, just to be aware of it. And sometimes we even run user tests on like a Wix sign up because we want to know what works well and what works badly with it. But it doesn't really provide inspiration. I get inspired when I go to museums. I get inspired when I, listen to a podcast with an astronaut. Just things from around. I think that true innovation usually comes from the meeting and crossing of disciplines, not necessarily, a laser focus within one. So I definitely, my life is building web products, and that's what I do all day. But when I try to consume and put information into my head, I'm trying to get as much variety and randomness and stuff out there as possible. And that's like, I follow Chris Sacca. I didn't answer that part of the question. So I follow Chris Sacca, Mark Andreessen, interesting bloggers, Kottke, people who blog about culture and economics and art and things other than just tech. And yeah, I just try to put myself into random situations like this. And sometimes I'll travel to a country just to kind of see it, just to kind of experience like what the tech is like. What kind of cell phones are people using? When I'm in the immigration line, what apps do people have on their phone? I'm just trying to, and then how do they dance? Where do they go out at night? Like all these sorts of things I think can inform you. And the more you can kind of put stuff in there, the more you can learn. And with that, I would like to round of applause for the organizers for bringing us together. And thank you again for all of y'all for coming out on a beautiful Sunday. It's like really nice outside, and we're sitting in this fluorescent room. So thank you so much for that, and I hope to see you all on Twitter. I'm at Photomatt, PHOTOMATT. My blog is ma.tt. It's powered by WordPress. And I hope to see you all online. And I apologize for having to run, but thank you.
So we give a round of applause to Thank you for coming. You two gave us a lot of insight.
Oh, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Come again.